Recording. So I just wait for the countdown to start. There we go. Hello, everybody. I'm your host. I still don't know what I'm doing, Eric Smith. So we're going to jump right into my favorite horror with the author of Go Down Hard. To offer her pleasure, Ali Seay. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
And how are you?
Okay.
Good. So before we get to the main event, I do have a few just sort of general interview type questions for you. I've read Go Down Hard.
Mm-hmm.
I have not gotten to this one yet. But in your author bio here, it says, I'm going to paraphrase, that you had written professionally for the last 15 years and then began writing in the genre you love.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So my question is, what brought that about? What brought about that change?
I found that I was good at one thing, but I really loved another thing. So I kind of, after 15 years, thought it was time to maybe try horror. I had tried it in the past, but I was never satisfied with it. And I guess I had percolated long enough, and I went ahead and gave it a shot. And that's the first book that came out of my brain, and I was pretty happy with that. I thought it was pretty good. So it was just, I was ready for something different, something new. I knew I could do the one genre, so let's see if I can do another.
Okay. And of course, Go Down Hard is from Grindhouse.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite small press publishers. They're top 3.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So did you have to pitch to them? Was there a conversation beforehand?
It was an open call for novellas. I had sent it somewhere else, and it had made the first cut, but when it came down to the final selections, it hadn't made it. And the Grindhouse open call came up, and I had read a bunch of their stuff, and I was like, well, they'll never take it, but what the hell? You know, it can't hurt, right? So I sent it, and surprise, they took it. And it was supposed to come out in 2021. But it was fairly quick work to get it ready to go, and it ended up coming out, during the plague. So, which was a bright spot.
It was a bright spot for me during the plague, and it's I saw it on social media. I think it gets a bad rap, which is unfortunately too often deserved, but I have found so many great authors, so many great books on Twitter, mainly, occasionally on Facebook, Instagram. And this one I was seeing a lot of on Twitter.
Well, I kind of lucked out because Nightworms got a hold of it. And Nightworms, it was a hit with Nightworms, so you can't ask for anything more than that.
Oh, absolutely.
Anybody involved with them, they love their books and they love to show it off and promote authors. So I got lucky.
Well, that was so probably on Sadie Hartman's Twitter is probably one of the places I saw it. And of course, I love the cover. Very cool cover. It sounded interesting, and I like to go to Grindhouse and order directly from them when I can. So I'll order 3 or 4 or 5 books from them, and this was part of one of those orders. And really loved it.
Thank you.
Fantastic book. So, of course, when I saw that this was coming out, I jumped on this, pre-ordered this one.
Okay.
And got the little book plate.
Yeah. First time doing that, signing book plates. That was fun.
I don't know how recent a thing that is, but I do know recently I've been getting a lot of those from different publishers.
Well, it's easier than sending out pages to sign. Yeah.
Right. So I'm definitely looking forward to this, but it's Go Down Hard definitely put you on the list of I'm going to pre-order that when it comes out. And this is Weird Punk Books.
Yeah, another great indie publisher. I love their pen.
Pardon me?
I said I lucked out again. I got into another great indie publisher.
And another great cover.
Yeah, beautiful, right?
Really, really dig that. Yeah, fantastic. So let's see. Well, since I haven't read this one, do you want to pitch it a little or plug it a little bit? Tell folks what it's about.
It's one of those typical. It's coming of age, and it's from a boy's point of view, and it's kind of grief driven, and it's sort of one of those scenarios where you find this entity, and you know it's probably a bad idea to engage, but you do it anyway, and things kind of go downhill from there. That's the best I can do without giving out too much information. It's a pretty short book, and it's it kind of just jumps right in, and we roll all the way to the end. So Ben is suffering a lot of loss, and he finds something in his life that he can sort of connect with, and it's probably a bad idea to do it.
Always seems to be a bad idea.
And that being on the cover. You get to see what he's dealing with.
It's lovely. It's a lovely cover. Don't know about in real life. If you want to run into that.
What could go wrong?
And now, do you find you're more fulfilled now that you're writing horror?
I loved what I did, and I really enjoyed writing, erotica and erotic romance for all those years. I loved the community. I still love the community. I made a lot of what I consider real friends in that community, but I have always wanted to do this. So now that I'm doing it, it's fulfilling on a different level. So writing to me is always fulfilling, whether it's, no matter what it is, because I dabble here and there with just about everything. But this is something I never thought I could actually do, and feel like I'm kind of pulling it off. So yes, it's fulfilling.
Well, I can say I can say you're batting 500 at least.
Okay, good.
Can't say.
Yeah.
Can't say about the other one because I haven't gotten to it yet, but yeah, I really, really enjoyed Go Down Hard.
Thank you.
All right, let's jump in to our main event.
Okay.
So you picked the cult classic, just classic, Tom Hanks, Joe Dante film.
Mm-hmm.
The Burbs. Here we go. This is the Shout Factory collector's edition.
That's a very nice edition. That's what I have, but not even Blu-ray, just regular.
Classic. Well, when you picked this, I had to go out. Well, I didn't have to, but I went out and found a copy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all about special features. So I was very happy to find this copy because it's got all sorts of good. I can't get it back in the sleeve. It's got all sorts of good special features on it. All right, so before we get started, folks watching this, there will be spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie, what's wrong with you? But feel free to pause this video and go watch this movie, and then you can come back because we're going to talk about it. And I definitely want to talk about the ending, so there's going to be some spoilers. All right, so with that said, can you give us a quick synopsis of The Burbs?
Well, The Burbs, let's see. It's the quiet neighborhood where everybody's nosy, and there's these new neighbors, and they're kind of suspicious, and obviously everybody wants to know what's going on, and they start kind of spying on them, and there's a faction of the neighborhood who's like, oh, you're being ridiculous, and it turns out maybe these suspicions are not so ridiculous after all. Maybe these quiet neighbors are quiet for a reason.
And before we really dig in, why was this your choice?
I've loved this movie since I saw this movie in the theater, not to date myself, but yeah, I saw it when it was new, and I've always been a huge Tom Hanks fan, and this was really not what he became known for. And then you add all the ridiculous, insane other characters from the neighborhood that we all saw through the 80s and the 90s, and a lot of them we still see. And it was just like the perfect storm for me of ridiculous, but a little bit of horror, over the top, but believable, possible, right? Feasible.
I also saw it in the theater.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, I wasn't a huge fan. I enjoyed it. I loved the cast, but I didn't really know what to make of it.
Right.
But I've seen it since then and just watched it this morning for this, and was actually blown away by all of the things I'd forgotten. I forgot it was Joe Dante was the director. I forgot Carrie Fisher was in it.
Oh, wow.
Because to me, it was always, if the Burbs ever came up, I'm like, oh yeah, Tom Hanks and Bruce Dern.
Right.
And occasionally Corey Feldman
Uh-huh.
would pop into my head. And then I was completely blown away by the fact that Wendy Schaal, who I've seen in, so many things, that's Bruce Dern's wife in the film, you ever watch American Dad?
No, I've seen it. My kids play it. I've seen it here and there, but I never sat and watched it.
She is basically the second lead on that show.
Oh, is she?
She is the voice of Francine Smith.
Oh, okay.
Wife of the main character. So when I saw her name in the credits, I'm like, I really, really know that name. And then I saw her in the movie, and I'm like, oh, I've seen her in tons of stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then it finally clicked. Oh, that's the show I watched every day. American Dad is like my background show.
Right.
When I'm doing things, that's what's on, because I don't have to watch it because I've seen them.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, so I hear her every day and had no idea that was her. But yeah, so just rewatching it today was just blow after blow to my mind. Excuse me. All right. Is there anything you want to start with as we dig into it, break it down?
Not really. I'm interested to see what you have to say about
it. Well, my first impression was I feel it has a Tim Burton vibe.
Oh, I can see that.
I thought I had to watch the credits closely because along with that Tim Burton vibe, I thought it had a very Danny Elfman vibe in the music.
Mm-hmm.
But it is Jerry Goldsmith.
So you have so much more information than me.
Well, again, I watched the credits, watched special features.
But I can see what you're saying, yeah.
And
especially
have the IMDb up on my phone right now. It has that slightly fantastical feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had to look up when Tim Burton was coming into his own, I guess, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, things like that, to see if maybe he had been influenced by this. But he had some of those before this had come out. And babyface Tom Hanks.
I know. Not terribly long after Bosom Buddies, it was, which is a show a lot of people are like, what is that? First time I ever saw Tom Hanks was on that show.
Yes, absolutely.
So he still had, I don't think he had approached the whole, I guess what people would say, air quotes, serious actor. It was still like this, Joe versus the volcano, all, those kind of movies.
Bachelor Party.
Yeah, Bachelor Party. He was still just a funny guy.
Yeah. So it's great to see young Tom Hanks. And then, as I said, I had completely forgotten that Carrie Fisher plays his wife.
And she was amazing. Yeah, she was great.
Fantastic. Bruce Dern in possibly one of his more calm roles.
He was amazing too. It was the perfect cast, I think. I think if you put anybody else in there, it would have fallen apart.
Corey Feldman. And again, I was watching, there's the behind the scenes documentary. I didn't even have a chance to finish it. Is over an hour long.
Oh, then I have to get this and watch it.
And so Corey Feldman he had just come back from making whatever movie it was he made after License to Drive. But one of his, like where he was the headliner in the movie, had just come back to that to see Joe Dante about being in this. So he was kind of at the height of his fame.
Right.
And at the height of his trouble, being a trouble.
Sort of like the beginning-ish.
Like, well, he does in one of the things, he says he was dealing with substance abuse.
Okay.
And well, that, like Joe and
Carrie, fame and you have that money, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you're young. And he said Joe Dante, Carrie Fisher really helped him keep him grounded. And then some of the trivia said that this was at the time when he was friends with Michael Jackson. And they said Michael, and like, this was on IMDb, so who knows how true it is. It said Michael Jackson never came to set, but Bubbles the chimp would visit.
Oh gosh.
Until Joe Dante had to ban Bubbles from the set.
Too disruptive. Too many people wanted to see Bubbles.
They said that Corey Feldman would keep Bubbles in his trailer, and he would come back at the end of the day, and there would just be feces all over.
Oh no!
The trailer. So I guess they got tired of cleaning that up.
That would be bad.
So yeah, the movie starts where we see the neighborhood, very famous street on the Universal lot again with the trivia. The house that Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher are in was the house from Leave It to Beaver.
Oh geez.
Reworked. The house that Corey Feldman was in was the Munsters house. And they said the biggest, most at the time of the special features anyway, I don't know how long ago they were recorded. They said at that time the biggest thing for that lot was Desperate Housewives was filmed on that lot.
Oh.
So a lot of stuff happened there, but we get to see it and meet the different characters.
And Mr. Whipple's in it.
What's that?
Mr. Whipple's in it, the Charmin guy.
Yes. Yeah, so many great people. Robert Picardo and Dick Miller as the garbage men.
Right, I know.
And there's that one house that the lawn is dead, the trees are dead, it's spooky, it's dark, it's run down.
There are bees.
Yeah.
Remember the bees?
Yes. I love when Tom Hanks, when he first walks outside, very beginning of the movie, he's on his green lawn. It's the middle of the night. There's something going on in the basement of the house. And he just steps 1 foot across to the dead lawn, and then the wind just goes blowing through, and he steps back and the wind is gone. So we know there's something weird. And it's this heightened reality. And just watching it with a more critical eye today, I'm looking at like the way shots are framed and lighting and different things. And I think Joe Dante and his crew just do an amazing job with all of that.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful movie if you just pay attention to it, the way it's shot. It's got a very distinct vibe. And I always think of the one scene where Art and Ray start screaming. They start screaming, and the camera does that almost like a cartoon. It just in and out, in and out, in and out, just to kind of pop that effect that this is a terrible thing, that this dog has a human femur bone. It's bone.
Yeah, there are a few cartoony moments. There's that one, which to me, again, when I was watching it today, just reminded me of that was pinnacle Tom Hanks at that time. That sort of goofy, over the top. When he's screaming, it's not quite he doesn't have a look of horror on his face. It's this weird, over the top Tom Hanks look. I don't know how else to describe it.
Quite a few of them in there. The end when he's coming down the steps. That's my favorite moment.
Yeah.
Favorite moment in the entire movie is when he comes out of that house and he just thump 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 down the steps.
Yeah.
can watch it 100 times in a row, and I will laugh 100 times in a row.
That, and apparently this was improvised. When he gets on the gurney, he's like, I'm ready to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then he just jumps off the gurney and grabs it, picks it up, throws it in the ambulance, dives down face first on it. Face first. Hilarious and apparently improvised.
I believe it, yeah.
But then another cartoony moment is when Ray Art.
The shed.
What's that?
When he goes through the shed.
Yes, when he falls through the top of the shed, and then we get an overhead shot, and it's his outline.
Yeah, that is very cartoony. Yeah. Human shape, yes.
Yes. And his performance is great. He comes out and he's like, look at my fingers, my nails are black. Mm-hmm. My fillings are hot.
Mm-hmm. He was great.
Apparently he and Tom Hanks didn't get along perfectly on set.
Wow. You can't tell.
But, well, Joe Dante said that he said the dynamic you had between them in the movie, especially when Ray was irritated, or Art was irritated with Ray, either way, he's like, that was the way they were on set.
Oh, wow. That's weird.
But everybody else, everyone else seemed to have good things to say about everybody else, and no one really had bad things to say about. I'm going to look at his name.
Rick Dukeman.
Dukeman, yeah. No one had like anything bad to say about him. They're like, he's a funny guy. He did great work. It was just like there was a little tension between him and Tom Hanks.
Probably because they're both funny guys. Battle of the funny guys. Yeah, that would make sense.
And then, so eventually, they don't know what's going on with these new neighbors. There's rumors. Eventually, we see our first new neighbor, who is Courtney Gaines. Mm-hmm. Probably, almost definitely best known as Malachi from Children of the Corn.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which on IMDb, that is his first credit.
Is it? Yeah.
But he's all made up to look weird.
Dirty and weird.
Yeah. Weird hair, prosthetic teeth, and
clothes that are too small.
yeah, that really adds to his weirdness. I'm looking; it's almost like he's wearing culottes.
Yep.
Because they're not even just like high waters; they're halfway up his calf. And yeah, so his performance was really wild, and he only has 2 lines in the whole movie.
Yeah, he doesn't really talk.
But he works well with his physical performance. I like when Bruce Dern's getting up in his face when the neighbors finally get into the house, the weirdo's house, and Bruce Dern's kind of in his face, and he's just backing up. And when Wendy Shaw touches him at one point, and he just freaks out.
And she goes, oh.
Yeah. Her performance is great.
She's great, yeah. And the best part of that house scene, one of them, though, is Bruce Dern just randomly, and I wonder if that was improvised, just randomly pulling the wallpaper off the wall. Just
Apparently
pulling
it was.
Who does it? It was?
Yes. Well, apparently they were filming during a writer's strike.
Oh, okay.
So there could be no revisions. Even though the writer was on set, he plays one of the cops at the end.
Okay.
But he wasn't allowed to do anything, so there was a lot of improvisation. And they said that the picking at the wallpaper was a little bit.
It fits his character so perfectly.
And I just like he's kind of picking at it. And he pulls it pretty far before he sort of realizes what he's doing. And then he's trying to stick it back up, fit it right back into the place.
That's not going to work.
So many great little pieces like that that everybody does. And apparently I didn't notice at the beginning, at the breakfast table in Tom Hanks' house, there's a box of Gremlins cereal.
Oh, I didn't notice that either.
I didn't see it. Apparently it's there.
While Art is eating everything in the refrigerator. And yeah, okay.
Yeah, I love that bit. Where he's just
You have like ribs.
eating all their food.
He eats the dog food. That was one of the best. She walks by with the dog food and kind of makes a face and then just keeps eating.
And then the kid comes in and he's eating an apple while Art's got the ribs in his mouth. Excuse me. So yeah, it's definitely, it's a very odd movie. That, I mean, obviously it's a dark comedy.
Right.
But even again, I'm going to keep going back to the special features and things. Like Courtney Gaines, he said, when I got the script, when we started making it, I just thought it was a comedy. It was just going to be a comedy. He's like, but obviously it's a horror comedy.
Right.
There's so many horror elements to it. And a little nice horror tie-in. Apparently, the little white dog, Walter's dog,
Queen,
is the same dog from Silence of the Lambs.
Oh yeah, I had read that recently. So Queenie is Precious, right? Precious was the name of the dog in Silence of the Lambs?
I think so, yeah.
They're the same dog. That's funny.
Yep. That dog's got a pretty good agent.
Right? I know.
There's so much going on in my head that I want to talk about. Any particular scenes for you that are standout? Any performances? Any little things?
I don't know his name. Klopek, the older one, not the doctor.
Brother Theodore is the actor. Brother
Theodore. Okay. On rewatching it, we recently watched it with the youngest kid in the house. The slow introduction to horror. So we did Tremors and we did this. And it was when they're all over there sort of grilling the Klopeks.
Mm-hmm.
They've come to introduce themselves, and Tom Hanks is eating sardines and pretzels, and
yes.
Carrie Fisher's kind of like encouraging him. She won't eat them, but
yeah,
when I think it's Bruce Dern who says, I didn't see a moving truck, and
yes.
when his response to that, I never really picked that out before, but the last couple times we watched it, that just makes me cackle. It's so perfectly done. There's so much anger in it that he's trying to tamp down. It's a great scene in the middle of a great scene, and the garbage truck.
It's a wonderful line reading of that. He says, Bruce Dern says there was never a moving truck, whatever he says, and he's like, I don't see how, or he says, I never saw a moving truck. He says, I don't see how it was here all day.
Parked outside all day.
Yeah, all day. And the bits with the garbage truck, and again, Dick Miller and Robert Picardo as the garbage men.
When he starts tossing it, what are you doing? You told me to help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got Bruce Dern hanging out of the back of a garbage truck, upside down. Half his face is covered in shaving cream, and
Yeah, I loved that. He had the half-shaved face.
Did you find a garbage bag that's, I can't remember the first part, but he said probably slightly moist.
Yes. It's slightly moist. It's just so many great bits that make this wonderful whole movie. And then Henry Gibson as Dr. Klopek.
Right.
Always been a huge fan of him. And I love the bit where he's introduced, and his shadow, all we see is his shadow, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it's just little Henry Gibson.
Diminutive man, yes. And it's supposed to look like blood on his hand. But then you have that moment of horror, and then you come into this room, and it's practically on fire, because he says, I think the candles would have been a nice romantic touch. And it's like 100 different candles burning. It must have been like 98 degrees there when they were doing that.
Well, the way it's shot, when the camera comes into that room and he's saying that line, and at least for me, all I see is a few candelabras and things, and then he finishes saying that, I thought the candles would be nice, and he moves, and you see there's got to be 20 candles just clustered together on the table.
Yeah.
And then there's, oh, before I forget, we're kind of jumping around. So there's a point. Art and Ray are down in Ray's basement with this sort of satanic book.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, and then we cut to Ray is in bed with his wife. She's looking through the book. And then she goes to the bathroom and he's watching television.
Right.
And there's 3 movies. The third, because he's watching something, he changes channel a couple times. The third one is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The second one is The Exorcist. I don't know what the first one. Do you know what the first movie was?
No, I knew the other 2, but not the first one.
Yeah, I looked through all of the trivia on IMDb hoping someone would say. And yes, I have no idea what that first movie is that he's watching. And then in a little bit of kismet, well, he has his nightmare.
Right.
But then he wakes up and is watching Mr. Rogers, which Tom Hanks, or who Tom Hanks would go on to play.
Right. Yeah.
I love the nightmare scene.
Well, one of the great things about the movie that I like, the story within the story, when Art tells the story of the shop guy, Skip. Yeah. And then that's how he appears in the dream for Tom Hanks. And that's like, a little bit of a real nasty little kind of horrific story in the middle of what appears to be on the face of it just a comedy, a comedy. So that was
I love how he comes up and he's just like, it's me, Art. I'm just dressed as Skip to blend in. I don't know if that was the moment. There was a moment in the film where I started thinking I could see this being remade as a straight horror film. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was like, I'm a fan of Blumhouse, and that's the first thing that comes to mind. So I wonder if like Blumhouse just took this, kept all the major beats and everything, but just made it straight horror. I think that would work.
Yeah, I think it would work. This was deliberate, the balance of the 2. So if you extracted the humor, changed it a little bit, I think it could work.
And yeah, so we have these crazy dream sequences with him, Tom Hanks strapped to a giant barbecue. It was great. Excuse me. And then the Klopeks leave and they break in. First, they start digging in the backyard.
Right.
Because the dog found a femur.
Right.
And then they break in. We get to see the basement with the giant furnace. And
5,000 degrees, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's typical.
Standard house.
Although Tom Hanks says it's not that big a house, and I'm like, I think that's a pretty big house.
No, it's a big house, yeah.
I mean, not 5,000 degrees big, but
no,
it's a pretty good-sized house. But and Bruce Dern just up on the roof
in his short robe.
Yes, and Corey Feldman calling everybody to his house to watch. Better than
the pizza dude, right? So everybody's fed. I called the pizza dude.
Yeah, they're like, we're gonna go to Mickey D's or something. He's like, no, I called the pizza dude.
Which ends up being crucial to the ending. The pizza dude.
Yes. But Bruce Dern with his the huge walkie-talkie with the giant antenna on it, and his rifle with the giant night vision thing on it. Very much a product of its time, the movie.
Right, yes.
And then when he falls off, that was a great stunt, I thought.
That couldn't have been him.
No, I don't think it was him, but still a good-looking, just sliding across the different parts of the roof and then hitting the ground.
I think that's my favorite role of his ever. So I mean, he's on the roof. He's got all of his military equipment. He's watching, and he's drinking cocoa and eating animal crackers.
He's eating the animal crackers, and he pulls it out and he bites the head off. And I was like, well, of course, that is the right way to eat animal crackers. You always have to bite the head off first.
Yeah.
That's only humane because you don't want the rest of the animal cracker to feel the pain of being eaten.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Like I said, and I think a bit more subdued than most people are used to seeing him.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all, well, like Tom Hanks is the eye of the hurricane for a decent amount of the movie.
Right.
It's all the other neighbors that are wacky. But he eventually loses it.
Yes, and that's when it gets, the ending towards the end when he kind of snaps when he's digging, and then the gas eruption.
Yes.
From then on out, he's just the Tom Hanks that you're kind of expecting when you watch the movie then with Tom Hanks in it.
Right.
Then he went on to do more serious stuff, but from the moment he hits that gas line until the ending credits is when he kind of loses his shit.
See, I would go a little further back.
Femur bone?
To when they visit the Klopex,
mm-hmm.
and they come back, and he agrees with Carrie Fisher and Wendy Schaal that no, we're wrong. They're just people. We should leave them alone. But then he says, I want to talk to Art and whatever Bruce Dern's name is. Mark Rumsfeld.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to talk to them in the den. When he pulls the toupee out of his shorts, I think that's the point where he now believes they've done something. The neighbors have done something bad. I think that's his turning point.
Okay, I can see that.
I mean, obviously, his behavior escalates.
Right, yeah.
Later in the movie.
He snaps after that one. When he comes sliding out of the thing, he just, like, even when he tosses the stretcher, in and he dives onto it, and she says, honey, I'm going to just find out what hospital you're going to, and I'll meet you there. And, okay.
Yeah, she's like, are you okay? He's like, I'm fine.
Okay, honey. And she's like, are you okay? I'm fine, Carol. He's just he's done.
Even before that, when they're just sitting there and he's like, I like your new haircut.
Yeah, I really like your new haircut.
But
his eyes all puffy, and they've done up the side of his head. So he's like burned, and he's swollen, and he's completely and utterly, and he's ready to kill Art.
Yeah, he's got one of those metal splints on his finger.
And he is ready to kill Art because now he is flipped back to, this is ridiculous, and they're just normal. They're just normal. We're the abnormal ones.
Yes.
So then I think that, yeah.
And it's, we the audience are given that impression because the Klopex have gone away for the day.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming back and they see that someone's in their basement, and they leave again. They leave the cul-de-sac, and when they come back, it's with the police.
Mm-hmm.
So we, the audience, are like, yeah, obviously these other people are crazy.
Right.
Because the Klopex have gone to the police. They must be the victims here.
Right. There must be nothing wrong in their house. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing in their house.
Which brings me to my confession.
Uh-oh.
Because it has been a long time since I've seen this, until today. I could not remember how it ended, and was thinking that it did turn out that the Klopex were completely innocent.
Yeah.
That it was going to be, the house blows up. And I almost in a Mandela effect would have sworn that the Klopex were like, this is what happened in our last neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Every place we move, we just want to live our lives and do our thing. Right. And people keep doing this to us because we're different. But that's not how it actually turns out.
No. And isn't it, in a way, it's sort of thanks to Ricky, Corey Feldman's character, because he's paying attention.
Yes.
So when Tom Hanks comes flying out of the ambulance in a fight for his life, and they slam into the Klopex car, there it is. That's why they called the police. They're carrying it around with them.
Yes. Yes. And I guess there was a number of choices for that scene. So the trunk of the car pops open. Corey Feldman pulls a blanket up, and there's just bones.
Yep.
Because Henry Gibson had confessed, he'd crawled in the back of the ambulance with Tom Hanks, confessed that they killed the previous owners. Now he's trying to kill Tom Hanks. So Corey Feldman pulls the blanket off. There's bones, but they had tossed around and may have even filmed it. I know there's an alternate ending on the special features I haven't gotten to yet. One idea was it would be dead cheerleaders in the trunk. And the other one was that it would be the two garbage men dead in the trunk.
Uh-huh.
But they went with the bones.
Right.
So obviously the Klopex. And then Courtney Gaines, poor Hans, just trying to sneak away. And
Hey, where are you going?
Bruce Dern tackles him. I was in the bush for 2 years or however long. I can snap your neck like it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that? No, that's not one of his other lines. Courtney Gaines. He says sardines. That's one line. I can't remember what his other line was.
I think when he says his name, doesn't he say his name?
Maybe. Yeah.
It's something, it's a throwaway, it's nothing. Sardines is memorable because of what comes next, you know. Horrible.
And I guess a lot of the actors and people in the special features were saying, like originally, the ending was supposed to be completely ambiguous, and the audience was never supposed to know if the Klopex were or were not evil or bad guys or whatever.
Wow, I wonder how they would have done that.
And they even, at one point, Tom Hanks' character was supposed to die. Henry Gibson was supposed to be successful in killing him. But I guess at that point they were like, no, people are not going to want to see Tom Hanks die. And Corey Feldman talked about, he said he got upset because about 20 minutes worth of screen time of his was cut.
Mm-hmm.
But then he got the last line of the movie.
Right.
Where he looks directly at the camera and says, love this street.
And he broke the fourth wall.
Yes.
Which I don't really remember, you know, this movie, I think it was 90?
89.
89.
Let's see. 89.
I'm thinking of Tremors, I think. Anyway, I had never seen anybody do that in a movie. I hadn't. It didn't mean it had never been done, but it's more common now. It wasn't very common when this movie was made for them to address the audience, which is basically what he did at the end. Yeah.
And he did say in the interview that they have with him that he's like, turned out Joe Dante was right. That was the way to go.
Yeah.
He says, conventions, people still come up to me and just say, man, I love this street. I thought his performance was great.
No, he was good. He was really good.
I got a little discombobulated because I had thought he was a kid initially, but then when I started watching, I'm like, well, he's home alone. He's drinking beer. Is he supposed to be like 18, 19, 20, 21? But then they talk about how, your parents are going to be home.
Yeah.
It's like, so he is a kid, just a little more mature, maybe. No one cares that he's drinking.
It's kind of that kind of street. It's like, it's not my kid, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as your little dog doesn't crap on my lawn.
Right, exactly. Plus, you know, well, he was hanging out with Art.
Yeah.
When Tom Hanks came over to smoke cigars. He comes over to smoke cigars. His wife doesn't know he does it. So, even if he was, I took him always as being like 18, 19. You would still be living at home probably. And most people in the 80s, if you were 18, wouldn't pay much attention if you had a couple beers, as long as you weren't, setting your house on fire or whatever.
I just remembered one of the little bits that Bruce Dern does that I absolutely loved, and it's really subtle, is early in the movie, Queenie craps on his lawn, and he's raising his American flag, and Corey Feldman tries to warn him because he's stepping back, and he steps in the dog poop on his heel.
Mm-hmm.
And when he goes charging down the street to Walter's house, he never puts that heel on the ground.
Oh, I've never noticed that.
I don't know. It just popped out at me. He's going so it looks like he has a bit of a limp because he's never putting that heel down. Because I don't know if he's trying to preserve the evidence or just doesn't want to get crap all over the street.
Splash it all over the rest of his shoe, maybe.
But yeah, maybe. But it's and again, is that a Bruce Dern bit? Did Joe Dante tell him to do it? But it's those subtle little things that, for me, can make or break a movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of those in this one. There's a lot of little tiny things.
And again, it's a kind of a Tom Hanksism. When he and Art really get into it, because Art has slipped the note under the Klopex door,
mm-hmm.
and Tom Hanks flips out because he's like, they saw me slip a note in Walter's house. They're going to think I did it. And then when he goes to walk in the house and Carrie Fisher's walking out and hits him in the face with the door, mm-hmm. and he grabs 2 beer cans, which he's already done once, grabs 2 beer cans, smashes them, throws them on the ground. And she says he's holding his face with one hand, and Carrie Fisher's like, oh yeah, crush some beer cans. Does that make you feel better? And just, he just does this thing like,
yeah,
with his hand, like, yeah, maybe. And just the way he does it, it's just this perfect little character thing that was the character, plus also very much Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But he's so spooky looking in that picture. I'm sure there's so much, just the set design, everything about this movie just works.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's something that everybody can relate to. Everybody's lived in a neighborhood where people are nosy and people pay too much attention to other people's business, and they talk amongst themselves about an outlier. But then on the flip side, how many serial killers' neighbors have been interviewed and they're like, they were just the quietest person. They were, so mm-hmm. It's both sides of the coin. It's a completely relatable neighborhood, but the scenario is not too far-fetched that it couldn't happen. I mean, maybe the 5,000 degree.
Yes. 5,000 degree furnace.
Yeah, that's a little over the top, but living next to a killer, maybe not.
I got one of my favorite episodes of The Twilight Zone is The Monsters Who Do on Maple Street. And I got that. Are you familiar with that?
No, I never really watched. I never had access to it until Netflix and stuff like that. So I've watched some, but I have not, by any chance, seen even a large majority of them. It's
a suburban street, typical mm-hmm. suburban street. And one evening, I don't remember all the details, but essentially all the power goes out just mm-hmm. on these, I don't know, half a dozen houses or so. And so all the neighbors come out into the street and they're talking what's going on, and people start throwing out these crazy theories. And then the power comes on in one person's house, and they start accusing that person. You're the one that's causing this. You're an outsider. You're this. But then their power goes off, and the power comes off, and somebody goes on in someone else's house, mm-hmm. and they turn on that person.
Right.
And of course, the twist at the end is there's actually aliens up on this hill manipulating everything and watching it. But just the close-knit community, smaller group of neighbors, and I mean, they don't really turn on each other till Tom Hanks snaps at the end, but it just gave me that vibe of here's this little community and they're suspicious of the house that's different.
The new people. That's like the shtick through the whole thing is someone through the entirety of it is suspicious of them. I think initially it's, they're just like, they're so weird, they never come outside. And then all of a sudden, it kind of spreads, which is what stuff like that in real life would happen, is these people talk to these people, and then you kind of win them over, and the next thing, and even the women are like, it's the women who are like, you guys are ridiculous.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with them, they keep to themselves or whatever. But in the end, it turns out that this was valid. And in some cases it's not valid, and in a few horrific cases, including this fictional one, it is valid, because the outsiders were really outsiders.
It doesn't help that their address is 669,
Mm-hmm.
and when Tom Hanks knocks on the door, the 9 spins down to a 6, and then he knocks again, and the whole thing falls. That's when the bees come out and attack.
That's another great Bruce Dern moment. Run to water, and then he gets
the
caught
hose.
Runs out of hose,
Run to water, and then what's his name? Art just spits a bee out.
Yeah.
Of his mouth.
I don't know if it was a real bee. It sure looked real, but
it did, and they put in the buzzing noise.
Right.
But he spits it. You never see it actually like move or fly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Another little bit of trivia. Do you remember the painting that Bruce Dern kept turning around? Didn't seem to know which way it was supposed to go. Apparently, that's a painting from the TV show Night Gallery.
Oh, okay. It looked like a surgery or something was happening in
it that. Was surgery from the perspective of the patient.
Right. That's what because it looked like a surgeon with the mask standing up over him, and he
couldn't tell which way it was supposed to go.
And so then, of course,
Gibson was like, goes this way.
Right. The doctor went this way.
But Night Gallery, another Rod Serling show that I absolutely loved. One of the most traumatizing moments of my childhood was from Night Gallery. But that was one of the paintings from the show.
Huh.
But that was maybe Courtney Gaines had 3 lines. Because when they go into the house, Bruce Dern picks up that picture and he says something like, "Attractive woman, is she a relative?" And he just says, "It came with the frame."
Yeah.
Just so quirky. Excuse me. I'm so glad you picked this and I got to rewatch it. Although you've mentioned Tremors a couple times now, I would have been more than happy if you had picked that.
It was a hard decision. I had a running monologue for like an hour in the car. Which one should it be? Should it be this one? Should it be that one? Should it be a book? Should it be a movie? It's an impossible choice.
It is. I'm glad I'm the one asking other people to make that choice.
Yeah, this one is one that I didn't think I'd have a lot of people vying for the same title. I could see like a lot of people being The Thing, or I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
I think
quirky.
I think I've had a pretty.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I think I've had a pretty eclectic mix so far.
Okay. Well,
which has been nice. And I think so far there's only been 2 choices that I'd never seen before. But everything else everybody's picked, I've rewatched them, of course, but I think I've seen pretty much everything and own a lot of them. I did go out and buy this one and a couple others. But Tremors, I wouldn't have even had to rewatch Tremors. I've seen that so many times.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what I saw in the theater. That's one of those movies I put on, if you're sick or you're kind of bummed out for some reason, it's a good movie to put on. It's just fun.
Comfort.
It's fun from beginning to end. And so many, again, it's a great cast. Everybody in that movie was perfect.
Yep. Um, I was gonna ask a crazy. I was gonna say, well, who's the bigger star now, Kevin Bacon or Tom Hanks? But
Jeez, I think it might be a tie. I think they're both pretty big.
and of course, Kevin Bacon starting out in one of the classic slashers.
Mm-hmm.
But and then Tom Hanks. I didn't look at like his IMDb to see what immediately followed this movie. I'm trying to think of his first like dramatic role.
The first dramatic role I remember, and this is probably totally wrong, was Philadelphia. Like, is Forrest Gump dramatic, and did it come? I do terrible with timelines. What came when, and
Well,
I just know there was a shift from goofy Tom Hanks that you could count on being, kind of over the top to, oh wow, that was intense.
He had that dramatic turn in Family Ties. If you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, what's that?
Alcoholic Uncle, I think.
Yes.
Was it alcohol or drugs?
He was an addict. We'll just
he was
addicted to something.
Right.
But again, I can't place that in a timeline.
Mm-mm.
But I saw like Bachelor Party in the theater.
Right.
And Joe versus the Volcano, which is another weird one. Like, has that weird balance. Is it a comedy? Is it a romantic comedy? Is it? It's an odd movie, but I like it.
A lot of people hated that movie. It did not get a lot of love when it was new.
Well, apparently when the Burbs came out, even though it made money, the critics ravaged it.
Yeah. I never pay attention to the critics, so I liked it, but I have liked it more with each rewatching of it. It's something about it that it continues to build. So the more I watch it, the more I like it.
I think, at least for me, because like I said, I saw it in the theater and I didn't know what to make of it. So I think for me, it's a matter of multiple viewings as well as me getting older and learning to appreciate the little things. And again, things like the cinematography and the direction and everything. Because I was noticing just the way shots were framed. I don't remember what point it is. I think it might be when Ray and Art are going up to the Klopek's house for the first time, but they're framed by tree branches that are almost a frame around the screen. And it was just like a really cool shot.
Yeah, I'd have to watch again for that.
Or when they're going up to the Klopek house and they do this sort of spaghetti Western thing where the other neighbors are watching. They zoom in on the eyes of each, including the dog, Queenie.
What I loved is the complete, perfect, pristine line of demarcation between Tom Hanks' lawn and there. It's like once you hit the property line for that house, everything was dead. The trees were dead. The grass was dead. The porch was rotting. Art walks in, falls in a hole. It's like, don't cross this line because everything on this side is completely dead and gone.
It's that 5,000 degree furnace burning everything up.
Dry rotting the wood, right?
Yeah, and even Bruce Dern's character falls through a different hole in the porch, and he drops the brownies.
Yeah, porch brownies.
Those poor brownies. He still picks them up and gives them to him. Here, these are for your sweet tooth. All right. Any last thoughts on this before we move on? Anything else you want to say about?
No, I would just say if you haven't seen this movie and any of this lunacy sounds interesting, you should watch it. You should totally watch it. It's a great movie. I think it got overlooked a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely fantastic. A lot of the people in the special features talked about how it built up and became a cult classic. Mm-hmm. And was it Joe Dante said he was going to a convention. He was going somewhere and expected everyone to be talking about Gremlins, but they were talking about the Burbs.
Hmm.
He's like, everybody was talking about that. It's just built this huge audience.
Yeah.
And if you want to see Tom Hanks at, well, I don't want to say, I was going to say his zaniest, but I don't think that's, there are points where it's maybe his zaniest.
In there. Yeah.
It's in there. See Carrie Fisher between Star Wars movies.
Well, it made it even funnier with him because he wasn't just over the top Tom Hanks. He wasn't like the funny guy. Art was kind of actually the funny guy.
Right.
He was the funny dude, and Tom Hanks was the, you know, when he says, "Please, Carol, can he come out to play?" You know, they're standing down in the yard. Can he please come out? And he can't come out to play. So he kind of is supposed to be one of the saner of the bunch. So when he does have those moments, when he does crack, when he does get tired of waiting for someone to put him in the ambulance, stand up, wrestle the gurney, and toss it in, it makes it funnier than if he had just been the funny guy from the get-go. Seeing his descent into just cracking, you know, losing it.
Yeah, that scene where they're asking his wife if he can come out and play. They're little kids at that point. Mm-hmm. Art scuffs his shoe when she says no, and then Rumsfield shoves his hands in his pockets.
Puts his head down.
Like, shucks, you know, darn, he can't come out and play. His mom won't let him come out and play.
No, it's just, I think if you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's one of those movies that a lot of people know it now. It did become a cult classic. It did get a lot of love, but there are still a lot of people who are like, "What's that? I've never heard of that." And I'm like, "Oh my God, my heart." No, you know, it's just one of those must-sees.
And it's Joe Dante, who has made some wonderful movies. Excuse me. And I'm gonna do the thing that no one should ever do.
Oh no.
When they're recording something, I'm going to look something up on my phone because I just want to check something. I want to check to see if I'm correct about Joe Dante doing something. Because I might have him mixed up with somebody else. So, wow, he directed 10 episodes of the new Hawaii Five-0. That's not what I was looking up. Yeah, he did 2 episodes of Masters of Horror.
Masters of Horror.
So I am going to... Okay, so I think I had him mixed up with John Landis for directing an episode or 2 episodes of the TV show Psych.
Oh.
But...
one of my favorite shows.
I love that show. I can't wait for the new movie.
All the 80s, you know, tidbits they drop. How can you not, if you especially grew up around that time?
But you know, Joe Dante, Piranha.
Mm-hmm.
In the behind the scenes features, he's sitting in front of this huge portrait of piranha fish.
Oh jeez.
I was just like, I would love to. I would hang that on my wall. That's beautiful. But you know, Piranha, The Howling, Gremlins, just a fantastic director who did something. I mean, this has maybe a Gremlins vibe to it, but it's even.
Yeah, I can see the link, even the way it's shot sometimes. That's another one of my favorites. I remember playing it for my son, and he was like, he was 8, and he had pneumonia. And I'm like, we'll watch this. This is so fun. And then I'm like watching it, and I'm like, wow, this is a little more horror-y than I remembered it. And I'm sad to say he had some bad dreams. That was my fault, because it's a little more of a horror movie than I think people realize, especially if you've never seen it before. You're looking at, you know, a Mogwai, and you're like, oh, but it's cute. There's some intense stuff in Gremlins, and there was in here too. Those nasty little bits. The story, there's a story in Gremlins with the dad.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff in them that There's an underbelly to these movies.
I don't know if it's apocryphal or if it's true that it was Gremlins and I believe Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom that were basically the cause of the PG-13 rating.
Hmm.
That they couldn't, those two movies balanced the line, or
Yeah.
that like the ratings board was like, well, it's really not R, but it's not PG. You have things blowing up in a microwave.
Yeah, PG was a different thing in the 80s. PG
So
then was not PG now. I think there was a little more leeway until they came up with PG-13.
yeah, so I think this, like I said, the story is, and I don't know how true it is, or if it's just one of those things that yeah, Gremlins and Temple of Doom were the cause of the creation of PG-13.
I could see that.
And I love, I'm a fan of Gremlins too, as
Jason,
well.
my partner's off screen. He said, "Gremlins, Gremlins."
And I love in Gremlins too, because as you said, in Gremlins, you have that great scene where Phoebe Cates is telling the story of her dad dressing up as Santa Claus and everything. And in Gremlins 2, they start a very similar scene where she has, oh, I remember this time when, and it seems like it's going to be that thing again where she's telling this horrifying story, and they just cut her off. No, we don't have time for that. Let's go.
Oh God, I think I only saw that once.
That's a very meta movie.
Yeah, I might have to watch it again.
I mean, the movie literally burns in the projector,
right,
because of the Gremlins, and then, well, there's a couple different versions, but in the most popular one, Hulk Hogan gets up and in the theater and yells at the Gremlins to turn the movie back on. But okay, so we've covered everything we have to cover with the Burbs, correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And yes, I agree with you. People need to see it if they have not. They should have paused this video and watched it before they heard us talking about it. So now back to you.
Back to me.
Do you have, is there anything you're working on? Any projects that you can tell us about?
I just finished a novella that I haven't even, polished. There's stuff out in consideration limbo, some novellas. So there are things I'm working on getting out there, but coming up, Dread Machine, mixtape 1986. The Kickstarter just ended for that. It's an anthology, 80s themed.
Mm-hmm.
And My Story Just Elaine will be in there. So I'm excited for that. And then Dark Dispatch is doing The Dead Inside is an anthology. And it's, I wrote it down, but Laurel Hightower and Sandra, I think it's Rattan. I never know how to say it correctly. I apologize, Sandra. I have a story in there. Ending is the only beginning. And that's about it for now. I mean, there's some other stuff, but I'm not allowed to say yet. So.
And that reminds me of something I meant to say at the very, very beginning of this. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I did. I have to apologize to you because when I recorded my review for Go Down Hard, I completely mispronounced your name.
Oh, I'm so used to it. Don't worry about
it. when I did my book haul video where I showed off To Offer Her Pleasure, I mispronounced your name. But I'm like, I think this is how you say it, but I apologize if it's wrong.
Yeah. I answer to all different variations of it. And it finally occurred to me I could have done this ages ago to put it on my Twitter account. I just put in parentheses, it's pronounced C, S-E-E. Yes. Yeah, because
that's where I got it. I was like, oh, I've been saying it wrong all this time.
But I answer to all variations because I've heard them all. When they come out at the doctor's office to call your name, I've gotten C. Occasionally they get it right, or it's C-A, Shay, Sealy. People add letters to it. I think it's too easy. It confuses people.
All right. So if you care to share, where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter, too much. It's at Ali Seay 11. don't at Ali Seay, just Ali Seay, because she won't know who you are. There's this poor woman who people have tagged. I'm on Facebook, but not much. But that would be Ali Seay Author. And I'm on Instagram, which is introvert_fitness, because that's all I was doing when I started it. So it's a wonderful name for a writing account, right? But that's where I am. And I think that's about it.
All right. Well, I have to do my outro. If you could just stick around for a minute. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for picking such a wonderful movie for me to rewatch and discuss. So, folks, that was Ali Seay. We were talking about the Burbs. So for viewers, if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. That's all I've got for you, folks. So until next time. Oh, let's see. I feel like I'm forgetting. Oh, I don't know what the next episode of My Favorite Horror With will be. So just check the description below, and I'll have that information when this video goes up. So that's all I have for you. So until next time, read more books. And